Alright, hello everyone. It has been a very long time since I made a video. It's time for that end of the semester reflection video that I always like to do. So before I get into too many more details, let's roll the intro. Alright, so I'm sitting here in what is my relaxation spot because the room that I would normally like to film this in is a little too cold right now, and I either have to run the heater to keep it not so cold because it's like minus 40 outside, or I can just do it where it's a little bit warmer. I have a lot to catch you guys up on. I think the last video that I made that wasn't a short video was about math and that I had failed my midterm. That was my first midterm in September. I haven't made a video since. There's been a couple different reasons for that. The one is I still felt this semester has been way too repetitive as far as I have class, I study, and I go back and forth between the same two different spots in the house. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't really shared much content. The other reason is because every week, in the last little bit, there's been something happening where I feel like I can't give all the information that I wanted to share all at once because I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. Now that it's the last day of classes today, which actually technically for me was on Wednesday, the actual technical last day of classes is today on December 12th. I've been on break now for a couple of days, and even just a couple of days has been great for trying to get back some of the sleep that I lost over the last couple of weeks, which I'll get into in a little bit. So essentially what happened is something would happen. I'd be like, I don't really know how to vlog this because I don't really have an answer to this. Am I going to remember that I talked about this when I go to make another one? So you know what, I'm just going to wait until the end of the semester, and then that way it's one video and there's no cliffhangers and all of that. So now that I know the answers to everyone's questions, I can actually finally make this video and talk a little bit about this semester in a different way, I guess. First thing, math. As you guys know from the short videos, I had a really big math exam. So the way our must-pass exams work for math is in first year, you're required to get 90% in order to pass. So they're usually out of 15 marks. You need 13.5 out of 15. You get 2 chances, and if you don't pass, you have to repeat the class. Second year is a little bit different. There's no differences in anything besides the fact that you need 100% on these math exams in order to, satisfy the same requirement. And I don't think people realize the amount of pressure that you're put under in these situations. I tell you, I can talk and show the math that we were doing. I wouldn't say it's difficult, but to know sometimes what a problem is asking you can be really difficult to figure out. I don't know if the best thing, what I should do is do a sample problem or something, but essentially a lot of it is if you were given a vial of something, what would you put to give a certain dose? That's the most common situation because that's what you're going to have to do. You have to be able to put it into an IV bag in order to know, okay, well, what do I need to add to make this IV bag? I mean, that's really practical. The stuff that I found the most difficult was figuring out like final concentration in the bag, because you not only have to take into account, okay, if I have a 50 milliliter IV bag, and I add in 6 mils of a drug, well, that means that I need to add in, that 6 mils onto the 50 mils. So it's 56 mils, and then your drug concentration is then whatever the amount of drug that you added in. So let's say you added in 500 milligrams of drug whatever into that bag. So it would be 500 milligrams over 56 milliliters equals X milligrams per mil. That's generally how you do it. But then they add in all these other ones. So they could say, oh no, we want it in percent weight per volume instead. Well, then you gotta know that's grams per 100 mils. So you gotta like meet certain definitions. So that's kind of like a little bit of what we were talking about. I'll illustrate this on the screen so that you guys aren't confused. That's a lot of what the concentration type problems and, admixture type problems are like. Some of the other stuff that we did in math is calculating TPNs. So you're often given a list of certain ingredients that you need to add into the TPN, and you might be given those ingredients in a certain percentage concentration from a stock solution, or you might be told you need X amount of grams in that, to add into the TPN. And then you ultimately need to add everything together because you need to figure out how much sterile water you're going to need as well. And the only way to figure that out is to figure out all of the amounts that you have for your TPN, take the final volume of what they've said the TPN should be, and minus all your ingredients, and that's what you got left to figure out how much sterile water you need to add in. The other thing that we were given is given a certain sheet that has if the doses, they're called CST TP sheets or CSTPP or some, they're called certain sheets, and they basically have all the information that you need and all of that about, if the drug dose is between this certain amount, put it into this bag. It's all the work's been done for you basically, but you still gotta know how to use them. And they give beyond use dates on there. So how long is this drug good for? That's what a beyond use date is. So that's kind of the stuff that we were being given to do, and it's hospital based, and it's really going to be important for next semester when we're doing our sterile compounding labs. And it's important for the people who go on and do hospital pharmacy and are in an IV room. My first math midterm, the reason why it went so badly was because I didn't understand that I didn't realize I didn't know how to do a certain type of question. So these are called reconstitution questions. When you're given a bottle of a reconstitution, like an amoxicillin or something, it tells you what you should be adding for distilled water to that bottle to make it a certain concentration and final volume and all of that. And if you follow the directions correctly, you should get a certain concentration according to the manufacturer. Well, sometimes mistakes are made and or you need to reconstitute it to a different concentration. And the way you do this is by figuring out what is called a displacement volume. So the amount of drug that is in that bottle is always going to displace the same amount no matter what. So to get it to a certain concentration, you're generally given either final volume of information. So it tells you final reconstituted volume, let's say is 250 milligrams per mil. You have 2 grams. What would the final volume be at that based upon the information? So what you need to do is you need to figure out that displacement volume, and then you need to figure out, okay, if I change this reconstitution, my final volume is going to be this, but then the amount of water that I need to add is going to be different because there's still the amount of drug that's going to displace that amount of volume. I have no idea if that makes sense, but I'll try my best to illustrate this in the video. that's what happened. There was, I think, at least 3 questions on the recon stuff. The reason why I struggled was because in the worksheets that we were given, it basically had step by step. So I knew what each concept was, like, what's your displacement volume? Well, I knew how to find that. But I didn't put it together that it was actually setting us up so that we could do any type of problem given all the information that we would need, or that we could figure out that we would need, basically. So when I only was given the label information, or the information that I would need to actually figure out the problem, I was lost on how do I get from the start to the finish. So with help from instructor and all of that, that issue was sorted out pretty quickly. That was a pretty easy solution to fix. So that's what happened with math, and I started to get much better. And in fact, my second midterm, I was stoked at how well I did. Usually our midterms are more difficult. Then we get into the must pass. So the must pass, I needed 100. I got nowhere close to 100. Had that been a normal exam, I would have been quite thrilled with it, actually, because I felt like it was a more difficult exam compared to that second midterm. In my opinion, I felt it was much more difficult going from a 47 to a, mid 70s on that. I would normally be like, that's great. That's fantastic. I felt that that was like one of the most difficult exams I've written so far. But because this was a must pass, it's not good enough. So I had to do my remedial. I did manage to do it. There is one thing though, so we get marks off if our documentation doesn't show certain things. So if our documentation is basically we show them how we're doing the problem. So if it's missing certain things, we'll get docked on it. So I do have to meet up with my instructor in the new year. We're going to make sure that I've got that down, because apparently there was some issues with that. I haven't actually seen it yet, so I can't really comment on it. And I'm not really going to share much beyond that, because I don't like to give anything away for the program for people who might be watching my videos and taking it later. So that's what happened with that, which I'm really happy that it wasn't documentation that cost me my semester, especially after how well I did this semester. In our labs, we have different parts that are different components that we need to pass, because our labs are pass-fail. So you have to meet a certain mark in each of these sections in order to be considered as meeting competency. So then you get a pass on it. Well, I've been really, really struggling with what are called nebules. So if you guys have ever seen, the mask things that people use, and then you put into like it almost looks like a pot type thing. For some reason, I've been really struggling with how to dispense these particular types of products, and a lot of it is just not familiar with the products and what they are, and, not seeing them a lot. I seen them a lot when I was like 6 years old because I had to use them myself, but, I wasn't dispensing them. So, they often come in like 2 or 2.5 mils. They often, at least here, come in packs of 20. And then, the way they're put into this computer system is kind of weird too. So there's just a few different things that you need to take into consideration when you're dispensing them. The one thing that was giving me really big trouble during this whole thing is called a time competency. So we're given a prescription and you need to do everything. You need to pick the right product. You need to enter the right doctor. You need to type out the instructions exactly how they should be for the patient, things that make sense based upon what the doctor's written. After all of that is done, you need to put in a quantity, you need to put in the refills if there's any, and, all of that, give the information, day supply, that kind of stuff. And we are given 6 minutes to do this for one prescription. To do this correctly, you should be checking it as well. It's a major pain point, honestly, and it concerned me enough that was like out of left field. I didn't struggle much at all last year with it, and a lot of it is because pills or capsules are pretty straightforward when it comes to like you have the right drug. basically. As long as you pick one off of the formulary, you're good. But with nebules and things like that, it can be a little bit more tricky. So that's kind of been a major pain point that was kind of a little bit out of left field, as I wasn't struggling with it at the start of the semester. But once we got into these more difficult prescriptions, I started to struggle with it a little bit. So I'm just gonna have to make sure that I'm paying attention to nebules and all of that, taking advantage of when I have nebules in front of me to really look at them, make sure that I know what I'm dispensing and all of that. I wasn't satisfied with it. I knew that it shouldn't be happening at this point in the program, so definitely a concern. Okay, so those are the two kind of major components to the semester. The other pass fail course was my hospital pharmacy practical type lab course. I did amazing on the final. In fact, I kind of wish that class wasn't just pass fail, because I probably would have had, another 90 in that particular class. I did really, really well on most things. The checking of prescriptions for that I struggled with, and one thing was because there was one thing that happened. I can't really get into details because I don't want to give away any answers, like I said, but there was a situation that happened with it where I was like, how do I document this? So I did it the way I thought I was supposed to do it, and apparently it was wrong. So that was quite a few marks off for that. And then there was another thing where I missed another thing. So I just have to be really diligent when we get into that next semester and make sure that I'm checking things appropriately. I kind of did those assignments a little quickly to a degree, so that was probably just me missing it, but I did great on the entry. So, you go from one situation in the lab and then the opposite situation in the other lab, so I found that quite interesting. The hospital course was all open book. I did really well in that theory course. When your answers are basically in the notes, I don't see an excuse not to, but you still need to kind of know your notes and all of that. I'm just concerned with the way that the exams were kind of made, that I'm not going to retain much. But hopefully I retain more when I actually get into the in-person stuff and actually start to follow their procedures and all of that. I think that's where that's going to be valuable, is learning those skills that go along with it. The other big course that took a lot of time this semester was part 2 of products. Was just a lot of products and a lot of information. I did a really smart thing. So as I've said in the past, I prefer using Anki usually to study for these kind of exams, because the spatial repetition is how you get this stuff into your long-term memory. Unfortunately, because of what was going on with lab and math and all of that, I only had a certain amount of time to prepare for my final for products. So I just ended up not being able to use Anki. So what I did was I used my concept maps that I had originally made to make the Anki cards, and I went through them, and because everything was right in front of me, I could pick up what I thought stood out. I picked up what I thought stood out, and I made basically fill in the blank questions. And that's what I used to study off of. And I'm just like, well, I'm hoping I picked out the right information. I did a really good job, actually. I was really happy with how well that final went. And overall, with how well I did in that class, there was a little bit of an missed opportunity, I think, to maybe get a 90 if some of my drug quizzes and all of that had went a little bit better. There was a couple that I definitely lost a decent amount of mark. I did perform quite a bit better in that second products class compared to the first, and it's just because I was starting to figure out how to study for it at the very end of the semester last semester. And then so what I did was I took what I learned from that first course and made it so that the exams focused on that kind of stuff in the second course. So I learned a little bit from the first time on how to increase the mark, and overall both of them, and I'm not complaining at all. The other class we had was a sociology course, and it was an asynchronous course. Quite a bit of writing assignments, but honestly, they're not looking for academic writing. You can tell that's pretty obvious. They know that you're in a certain type of program, and that, it's important that you be able to write, but maybe not particular in the way that you normally would if you were going to be a sociology major. So I think that helped. But I am very happy that I was able to do really well in that class. It helped that in our overall schedule, it was kind of scheduled in every week as to when we should maybe be focusing on that course. I stuck to that schedule, although I did get ahead at the start of the semester because I was a little bit concerned when I got closer to the must pass and the end of the semester with finals that I would be feeling like if I didn't stay on top of it, that the sociology would get in the way. And thankfully, it didn't. So I actually finished the course a couple weeks early, and then like the actual content, and then all I had to do was finish up a couple of assignments and an take-home exam. Our exams are really nice. We had two, but they were both take-home exams for us. And so that meant like they opened on a certain day and we just had to have them like handed in by a certain time and all of that. They generally gave us, so whenever we downloaded the like the information for it, like the questions we had to answer, it was basically that you were given the rest of the day to do it. So like very relaxed class, one of the most relaxed classes. The only criticism I have is that the information was a little outdated. I think our textbook was like 2015, 2016, and anything basically before COVID when it comes to a lot of this stuff is just outdated for pretty much everything, including like it was, I would say, a DEI kind of course. You know, when you're talking about certain things like immigration and how different certain, events affect different populations, it should be a little bit more up to date. And unfortunately, that was my only complaint about it. The one other class we had was a scope of practice class, one of the most useful overall, I think, in the entire program experience so far. Not only for me personally to know where that kind of edge is, but like where the technician scope ends and a pharmacist begins, or, what you can do as a technician. But, knowing at work when I happen to be working with the technicians, when I can go get them to handle a situation and when I have to go get a pharmacist is really actually beneficial. I think even assistants would benefit from understanding that really quite well, as if you have an assistant, generally they're probably going to be the ones with the patients first. I think they'd really benefit knowing that too, because not a lot of them know. They know a pharmacist can handle everything, but a technician, if you go to a technician and you tell them the situation, it's up to them at that point to go, okay, is that in my scope? That's not in my scope. You should probably go grab the pharmacist. That takes practice, and the more you learn about what situations you can handle and when that situation is the point where you can't handle, can be really difficult in certain situations, and particularly when you're dealing with patients in the over-the-counter section. It gets very, very gray very quickly. That was one of my favorite courses of the entire semester. It wasn't my highest mark by any stretch of the imagination. I ended up doing quite well, though, in it, just because there's a couple things that I did really, really well in that was worth a lot, so that helped. Overall, this semester has been one of the best semesters I've ever had in my life. This includes high school. I would have, actually been willing to pay for someone in university to have marks like this. I never got above what was my highest mark in university? Like an 82 or something. I think that was my toxicology course. Yeah, I think I had an 80 in one of my psychology classes and then an 82 in my toxicology course. Other than that, I really didn't mid 70s was generally where it was. So anyways, I think that's where I'm gonna end it. Thanks for joining me, everyone, and hopefully next semester I'll have a little bit of different stuff come the start of the in-person stuff. So this January, February is going to be very much like this, similar type of thing, and then March and April, I don't even know if I'm going to have time or the ability to vlog it. So, but yeah, thanks for joining me, everyone. Bye for now.